Today we're cutting through the noise to bring you one of the biggest developments in trade and automotive news, a move that could impact everything from car dealership prices to international trade relations. The White House just confirmed it. Starting April 3rd, all imported cars and light trucks will be hit with a 25% tariff. A sweeping policy shift that could redefine how vehicles are priced, sold, and manufactured in the U.S. And that's not all. By May, the same 25% duty will extend to key auto parts like engines, transmissions, semiconductors, and electrical components, many of which are essential to both domestic and imported vehicles. This isn't just another policy headline. This is a full-scale shakeup that's already sending ripples through global markets. Automakers are scrambling, foreign governments are responding with concern, and businesses across the auto supply chain are re-evaluating their strategies overnight. If you care about international trade, auto pricing, or what this means for your business, your bottom line, or even just your next car purchase, you're in the right place. We're here to break down what's really going on, what's driving this decision, and what you need to watch in the days ahead. In plain English with no fluff. And before we jump into the details, we need your help. If you find value in this kind of clear, fact-driven content, support our channel by liking this video, subscribing and dropping a comment below. Your support helps us keep breaking down complex trade news into clear, useful insights every single week. And it tells the YouTube this is content worth sharing with others in the trade and business community. Let's dive in. What's happening? On April 3rd, 2025, a new 25% tariff will hit all foreign-made automobiles and light trucks entering the United States. This includes vehicles manufactured outside the U.S., even if they're from American brands. For example, if a Ford SUV is assembled in Mexico or a GM sedan is produced in Canada, it will now be subject to this new import duty. Just 1 month later, on May 3rd, the tariff will expand to cover specific auto parts, including engines, transmissions, electrical systems, and key performance and safety components. This second wave is particularly significant because it affects the backbone of auto manufacturing. Modern cars often rely on globally sourced parts, even when final assembly happens within the U.S. Many domestic factories still import crucial components from suppliers in Japan, Germany, South Korea, and beyond. The scope of these parts is expected to be defined further by Customs and Border Protection (CBP) and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative (USTR). But early indications suggest that a broad swath of the global supply chain will be impacted. This isn't just a policy proposal, it's official. The announcement came via a presidential proclamation with full legal authority behind it, meaning it bypasses congressional debate and goes into effect under the president's executive powers related to trade and national security. It's a clear and immediate signal that the administration is taking a hard stance on what it views as years of unfair competition in the automotive sector. The why behind the move. So why is this happening? According to the White House, the core goal is to revitalize American manufacturing, reduce the trade deficit, and bring more auto production back home. Officials argue that for too long, countries with lower labor costs and heavy government subsidies have gained an unfair advantage in the global auto market, leading to U.S. factories closing, jobs disappearing, and American automakers struggling to compete. They believe this tariff is a necessary correction, a way to level the playing field and restore U.S. competitiveness in one of the country's most vital industrial sectors. But that's not the only reason being cited. There's also a national security dimension to this move. Administration officials say that relying heavily on foreign-made vehicles and parts, especially those produced in countries with strained diplomatic ties, could pose a serious risk if tensions escalate. For example, In the event of a geopolitical crisis, the United States could find itself unable to source the critical components needed for both civilian transportation and defense-related production. They point to the global chip shortage of 2021 and the pandemic-era supply chain breakdowns as proof that over-reliance on imports can bring entire industries to a standstill. Supporters of the policy believe that building a more self-sufficient auto sector is not only economically strategic, but essential for long-term national resilience. However, not everyone is buying that explanation. Critics say the national security rationale is being used as a legal shortcut to bypass Congress and fast-track a protectionist agenda. They argue that the move is less about real threats and more about political messaging, especially as the administration tries to rally support in key manufacturing states during an election cycle. Some trade analysts warn this could backfire, sparking retaliation from allies, raising prices for American consumers, and further disrupting supply chains that are already under pressure. Let's talk money. This new policy is expected to generate up to $100 billion annually in tariff revenue, according to internal projections from the administration. On paper, that sounds like a big win. More tax revenue without raising taxes directly on American citizens. But here's the catch: that cost will likely trickle down to the consumer. Tariffs work like a tax on imports, and when foreign car makers or U.S. dealerships have to pay more to bring vehicles into the country, they don't just absorb the loss. They pass those costs along. Some analysts estimate that prices for imported cars could jump by $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the model, brand, and country of origin. Vehicles from Europe and Asia, including BMW, Mercedes, Toyota, and Hyundai, are expected to see the biggest increases. For context, a $40,000 imported SUV could suddenly cost $50,000 or more. And that doesn't include dealer fees, financing, or state taxes. That means anyone shopping for a vehicle, especially higher-end or foreign brands, might need to rethink their budget in a big way. It could also cause a short-term rush on inventory, as buyers try to lock in prices before April and May hit. But it's not just foreign automakers who will feel the pinch. Many U.S. car manufacturers rely on global supply chains to source key components. Even if a car is assembled in Michigan or Tennessee, it may still depend on transmissions from Germany or electronics from Japan. Those parts will now carry extra costs, which could increase the price of domestically built vehicles too. On top of that, we could see inflationary pressure ripple through the entire sector. Auto loan balances, insurance premiums, and lease agreements could all rise as a result of the underlying price hikes. And let's not forget the impact on smaller auto businesses, parts importers, independent mechanics, and aftermarket suppliers, many of whom don't have the margins or leverage to absorb these changes without cutting jobs or raising prices. So, while the government sees this as a potential revenue stream, the real cost could land squarely on everyday consumers, small businesses, and anyone who depends on a functioning and affordable auto market. Even U.S. car manufacturers are expressing concerns, and not just quietly. Why? Because even if the final assembly happens in the U.S., many critical components still come from overseas. From specialized sensors to drivetrains and high-tech software modules, modern vehicles are global products no matter where the final badge is placed. A 25% tariff on those parts could drive up manufacturing costs across the board, forcing U.S. automakers to make tough choices. Absorb the cost and risk their margins, raise prices and risk losing customers, or delay certain models until supply chain strategies are reworked. That's why automakers are now scrambling. Rethink their global supply chains, identifying which suppliers will be affected and how to reduce dependency on foreign parts. Consider shifting more production into the U.S., a process that sounds simple on paper, but can take years of planning, retooling, and investment. Push back diplomatically through trade associations, such as the Alliance for Automotive Innovation and the American Automotive Policy Council, both of which are urging the administration to reconsider the speed and scope of the tariffs. Companies like Ford, GM, and Stellantis have all issued statements saying they're evaluating the situation closely, but many are already bracing for operational challenges. Behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on. Auto executives are holding emergency meetings with suppliers and lobbying lawmakers in Congress, hoping for carve-outs, delays, or even exceptions for certain parts categories. Some are considering filing petitions through trade adjustment processes to ease the blow. And for foreign automakers like Toyota, Honda, and BMW, many of which operate large U.S. assembly plants in states like Alabama, Kentucky, and South Carolina, the new tariffs introduce massive uncertainty. While their factories may be based in America, their supply chains stretch across multiple continents. If those supply lines become too expensive or too difficult to maintain, companies may reconsider future investments in the U.S. altogether. In short, this is more than just a pricing issue. It's a potential strategic crisis for an industry already grappling with electrification, regulatory shifts, and intense global competition. Unsurprisingly, international leaders are not taking this lightly. The European Union, Japan, South Korea, and Canada have all voiced opposition, and in some cases are actively preparing for retaliation. European trade officials have called the tariffs economically unjustified and warned that they violate international trade norms. Japan has emphasized that the move threatens global supply chain stability, particularly as the auto industry transitions toward electric vehicles. And Canada, one of the United States' closest allies and largest automotive trading partners, is especially concerned, since many vehicles and parts flow freely across the US-Canada border under long-standing trade agreements. Several of these countries are considering retaliatory tariffs on US exports, especially in politically sensitive sectors like agriculture, construction equipment, and industrial machinery. For example, Canadian officials have floated the idea of targeting US dairy and grain exports, while the EU could impose duties on iconic American goods like motorcycles, bourbon, and even tech equipment, a strategy used during previous disputes to apply pressure on key swing states. This could ignite a broader trade dispute, much like what we saw during the 2018 to 2020 tariff wars, when US tariffs on steel and aluminum triggered billions in countermeasures. That episode led to price hikes, supply chain disruptions, and diplomatic rifts that took years to smooth over. If tensions escalate again, the ripple effects could extend far beyond the auto industry. Sectors like aerospace, electronics, agriculture, and heavy machinery, all of which rely on international trade, could get caught in the crossfire. This in turn could lead to higher costs for businesses, layoffs in vulnerable industries, and a general chilling of international trade cooperation at a time when global coordination is already fragile. In short, what began as a targeted tariff on cars could balloon into a multi-industry standoff that affects everything from your grocery bill to the availability of high-tech components. Here's what to keep an eye on in the days ahead. Clarifications from CBP and USTR. Expect updates on exactly which auto parts fall under the tariff and how importers should classify them. The technical details could make a big difference for businesses navigating compliance. Industry lobbying efforts, major automakers and trade groups are already pushing for exemptions, delays, or phase-ins. These behind-the-scenes negotiations could shape how the policy is enforced or even modified. Responses from trade partners, Watch for formal complaints to the World Trade Organization or potential retaliation measures. What starts as a U.S. tariff could quickly evolve into a global trade standoff. Consumer reactions. If car prices spike heading into the summer, it could dampen demand and shift public opinion quickly. Dealerships and buyers alike will be watching closely to see how the market adjusts. The next few weeks will be critical as policies are finalized, industries respond, and the full scope of impact begins to unfold. Final thoughts. This is a huge development, and one with real consequences for automakers, global trade, and consumers like you. Whether you're in the industry, following trade policy, or simply planning your next vehicle purchase, these new tariffs could reshape the landscape in a big way. We'll continue following the story and breaking down how it unfolds, especially as the May 3rd parts tariffs approach and more details emerge from CBP and other agencies. All the sources we used are linked in the description, and we encourage you to read further, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay informed. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss a trade update that could impact your world. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.